In this video, I'll show you 5 ways how to factorize algebraic expressions. First, we'll take out a common factor, then a difference of two squares or dots, thereafter a trinomial. Fourth, we'll do the method of grouping, and finally the sum or the difference of cubes. First, taking out a common factor. Let's factorize the following expression. Here we can see that all of the coefficients are multiples of 2. We also see a common variable of x. So our common factor would be 2x. So when we factorize, we are simply dividing all of the terms by a common factor. But I write my common factor in front, and in the brackets, I write the solution of that division. So if my common factor is 2x, and I divide the first term by 2x, the answer would be x squared. If I divide the second term by 2x, the answer for that would be 2x. And if I divide the third term by a common factor of 2x, the answer would be -4. And that is how you take out a common factor. In our second example, we'll factorize a difference of two squares. So let us factorize 20x squared minus 45. And before we can apply the difference of two squares or dots, we look for a common factor. So in this expression, we can see that a common factor would be 5, meaning both terms are divisible by 5. So if I use the same method as my previous example, I can take out a 5 and I'm left with 4x squared minus 9. Now the expression in the brackets is a difference of two squares, because 4x squared and minus 9 all represent square numbers. And if I rewrite those two terms, I can see a difference between two square terms. And when I factorize, I will create two sets of brackets. So I'll take 1, 2 and an x, write it in my first bracket, and the remaining 2 and x in my second bracket, 1, 3 in my first bracket, and the other 3 in my second bracket, and place different signs inside both of these brackets. In our third example, we'll factorize trinomials. And we normally try to use this method when we have 3 terms. So let me show you 2 methods on how to factorize x squared minus x minus 30. For our first method, we'll focus on the factors of 30. So what I would like to do is I write 30, and the factors of 30 is 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and 5 times 6. These are the factors of 30, and I wrote them down in their pairs. So if I multiply these pairs with each other, they all will produce an answer of 30. And our aim is to find the pair of numbers that will produce a -1 when I add or subtract them together. So I can see that 5 and 6 have a difference of 1. So our numbers inside our brackets would be a 6 and a 5. And in order to get to -1, which is the middle term, the 6 needs to be negative, and we need to add 5. Then all I need to do is take the x squared and split it between the two brackets. So I'll have x plus 5 and x minus 6 in my second bracket. For our second method, I'll rewrite the 3 terms as 4 terms and use the method of grouping in order to factorize the trinomial. So you can see the coefficients that I'm using multiplied together will produce 30. And if I add minus 6x with plus 5x, that will give me -x. And that leads me to 4 terms, which is our fourth method of grouping. So when we group, we take out a common factor for 2 terms and a common factor for another set of 2 terms. So in the first 2 terms, we can see that the common factor is x. And when I take out an x, I'm left with x minus 6 for the first 2 terms only. And now for the second 2 terms, my aim is to take out a common factor so that I again can get my bracket of x minus 6. And that common factor would be 5. So if I take out 5, in my second pair of terms, I have a bracket of x minus 6. So I've grouped the first two terms together and took out a common factor. And then I grouped my second two terms together and also took out a common factor. But I also reproduced the set of brackets which I found with my first pairing. Now we have two terms, and our common factor for these two terms are x minus 6. So if I take out my common factor of x minus 6, in the first term I'm left with x, and in the second term I'm left with plus 5. Here's another example for grouping. I have 4 terms, and I'll group or pair the first two together, and I'll group the third and fourth term together. So my first two terms, the common factor would be 4x. And if I take out 4x, I'm left with 2x minus 1. Now in my second pair of terms, I want to take out a common factor to reproduce the brackets of 2x minus 1. And in order to get 2x minus 1, I need to divide both of these terms by negative 3y. So if I factorize negative 3y, I have 2x minus 1 as my other set of brackets. Now I have two terms, and the common factor of both terms is 2x minus 1. So when I factorize, I have 2x minus 1. And my second pair of brackets would be 4x minus 3y. And my fifth way to factorize is the sum or difference of cubes. So here I have two terms where the coefficients and the variables are cubed. So I can rewrite 27 as 3 cubed times x cubed and 8 as 2 cubed times y cubed. And when I factorize, I'll create two sets of brackets. In my first set of brackets, I simply rewrite 3x plus 2y. So I reproduce these two terms, but I ignore the exponent of 3. But now that I have one set of 3x's in here, in my first term, I'm still left with 3 squared times x squared. And that goes in my second pair of brackets as 3 squared times x squared. I'm also left with 2 squared times y squared. And in my second pair of brackets, I have 2 squared times y squared. Notice that this last term will always be positive. And for the middle term, I multiply 3x times 2y, which is 6xy. And I change the sign between the terms to negative. So for the middle term, I simply multiply the two terms in the first bracket, and the sign in front of it will always be different than the sign inside the first bracket. So my final factorization would be 3x plus 2y in my first bracket, and in 9x squared minus 6xy plus 4y squared in my second bracket.